Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending our meeting and also the ones that are watching this on the internet. This is Texans United for Texas, and this is our second Thursday meeting. It's January the 23rd of 2025, and Nelson Dice from Ocean City, New Jersey is going to talk to us about this Constitution, and he's going to give us his understanding of what it actually means. So Nelson, it's all yours now.
Thank you, Darren. The Constitution is the fourth document referred to in the statutes for the United States under what is called organic law. There are four documents. Four documents that preserve our rights against a tyrannical government are the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, which is the second one. The third one is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And finally, this Constitution, the original Constitution of 1787. So what I'm going to do tonight is offer some suggestions on how to begin studying for yourselves. And so we're just going to demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do first is ask everyone to please open up their phone and get the Declaration of Independence text. And what will come up if you ask YouTube or Google, actually Google to Declaration of Independence text, the first thing that will come up is archives.org, which is an ideal place to get the transcription. The reason I'm asking you to do this is you're going to follow along. I'm going to have one of my favorite presidents, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do the honors and read through the entire Declaration of Independence without interruption. A little under 11 minutes. And we can follow along. The reason we do this is one of my guests here said, what kind of learning is it, Ken? Active learning, if we are hearing and reading at the same time. So, I'm going to start. Everyone knows the date, July 4th, 1776, in Congress. We're going to have JFK read this as we follow along. So this will be without interruption, and I will do it for myself. Like any good truth that we read, truth becomes magnified at times where we see something new all the time. So here we go. July 4th, 1776, in Congress.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends.
My whole career I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new gods for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having indirect objects the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish their right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative power, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the form of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power, legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the work of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hand. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an indistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
If you're thinking of going back to school to get a new job so you can earn more, don't do it.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connection and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of a right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
That is the Declaration of Independence, which is the first of the 4 organic law, that our freedom is guaranteed by. And we can exercise the Declaration of Independence today. So what I'd like to do, rather than rush ahead to any of the other documents, I want to spend some time here at the Declaration of Independence, and I believe there might be another session next week we could continue. I don't know that we'll actually get to this Constitution tonight. It depends. But what we're going to do is give everybody an opportunity to make a couple comments, pick out a few of the points that were a complaint. These are basically charges that we made against the King of Great Britain and why we were demanding separation. So there's a few people here tonight that have lots of good input, so we want them to be our brain trust tonight and offer their comments, and I have a couple as well. Things that really stick out to me that are happening here on our lands that literally July 4th, 1776, why are we still experiencing these very same offenses, and who are the perpetrators of those offenses? Okay, so first up will be Glenn. You might have a couple comments.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to say that if you read the Declaration of Independence is basically a list of grievances. And if you list those grievances, they're all going on today, or at least they were under Obama and Biden. I think Trump is trying to put a stop to that stuff, but it's yet to be seen whether he does or not. I think he's certainly making a very good effort. But it's all of those grievances. If you read them carefully, you'll see that stuff ruining the lives of our people. What do you think they do when they populate the prisons? They're ruining the lives of our people, and it's just all over the place. You know, that's all I wanted to say.
I can make a comment.
Thank you, Glenn. Here is Darren.
I agree with what Glenn was saying because it's some of the same repetitious things that we're experiencing now, just like the trial by jury. You know, it's in there. They knew that they would try to get rid of that, and they put it in there to protect us. So we've got to tell public servants, you're going to give us a trial by jury or we're going to have our own.
Good. Anyone else want to make any comments?
He took mine.
Okay.
This is Ken.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't help but think of the court case I'm being drugged through. It experienced probably almost every one of those grievances.
From my perspective, the good news is that the Founding Fathers and many of the men and women who moved here, lived here, and decided to take up arms in defense of liberty had fled Europe for these same offenses, besides religious freedom, which is probably the most important one, but then there was economic freedom. There was freedom to basically do whatever one wanted as long as you did not violate someone else's right as well to their life or property or in committing injury. Besides that, it will turn into a free country. So let's think about July 4th, 1776. How far back that was. We had only been here on these lands starting in 1607, something of that nature, and slowly but surely. My understanding was that Philadelphia only had about 40,000 people in 1776. And that is actually my birth city, birth county. We're actually born on the county. That's the most important thing I've discovered about that. And what I want to do is I'm going to restart this, and then when Mr. John F. Kennedy gets to a comment, we'll stop it, discuss it, how it's happening today, and how to overcome it. Now, Some of us here may leap forward to some information that we have that's post-1776, which is fine, because then we can tie it together. But what I've learned is not to rush ahead to the Constitution, because by doing so, we skip the foundation. So war had begun, I believe it was 1775. When was the shot heard round the world? Was that 74 or 75? But so basically, we were trying to settle things with the king peaceably. And one of my favorite lines in here, and I use it with my friends in government: enemies in war, in peace, friends. You want to be my friend? Stop making war against me. Okay, so we're going to start it again. And just have a raise a hand and I'll stop it. And like I said, you feel free to scan ahead. And if you get to something that you see that you want to have a decent comment on to help educate, and we're going to take our time. We're not in a rush. Because if we just do nothing but the declaration tonight, that'll be fine, because we can always add to it later. So we're going to start again. July 4th, 1776, in Congress.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these.
So there were causes which impel them to the separation. I believe there was some sort of document in 1775 called something to the point of causes and necessity for taking up arms. The Founding Fathers and the people of America did not want to take up arms. They were being forced to because of the violations and the grievances that Glenn mentioned are listed, and there are many. It takes a long time to digest all the grievances that were happening. So imagine for a year or two or 10 years before this, 20 years before this, what had been happening to the people. That from far away, a government was sending their government agents to abuse the people and their rights. And unfortunately for the king, we had so much freedom here that we didn't want to go back to the tyranny that the people in Europe had been experiencing for hundreds of years prior to that.
Be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Does anyone want to comment on endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, Ken?
Yeah, I think it's important that they're referencing natural law and not any man-made law.
So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Among these, certain unalienable, or some read it unalienable, rights that cannot be leaned. So when the government comes and tries to lean on us to take away life, liberty, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that those rights have been endowed upon men by their Creator. Okay, the next thing that's coming up is to secure these rights. How the Founding Fathers, Jefferson in this case, wrote those could be secured. Here we go.
To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government.
So going back, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends. What are the ends? Securing our rights. Our rights are supposed to be secured by government. Government is supposed to be securing my rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we can add property. There was a debate on whether to use pursuit of happiness or pursuit of property in the original form. Hold on one second, Glenn. What?
You know what pursuit of happiness means? It means the right to get compensation for our labor. There's court cases that talk about it. So that's more than just property.
Well, it is. It's both.
Both meaning, repeat it so I can get it.
Well, it's more than property, but it's property and other things.
Pursuit of happiness is property and other types of things.
Yeah.
Right. So the government is supposed to secure us to be able to pursue, I think it used the word entitled. Certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So government is not bad. It can become bad. It can become destructive. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And to institute new government. Okay, we're going to pick up here after it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. What? The form of government. And to institute new government.
Laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form.
What are some of the principles of a form of government that can secure the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
As to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for life and transit causes.
So our current form of government has been growing since the 1860s in a negative way, slowly strangling the freedoms, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And these men from Europe realized that government should not be changed for light and transient causes. Do not have a knee-jerk reaction. But, let's see what they say.
Accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
Can anyone talk about how we've been accustomed to certain forms of government that have been slowly abusing our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, stealing it, taking it away, cheating us?
Been like frogs. We've been like frogs where they're slowly turning up the heat.
Right.
And also,
Steve?
in the public schools, which are really indoctrination centers, it's also conditions children into believing what their agenda is or their perspective. And the truth is ignored. They're value of freedom and liberty is just never taught to our youth.
So Jefferson wrote, mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable. So evil has been perpetrated against the people of America. And we, according to Jefferson, as mankind, we're more disposed to suffer. Just take it on the chin, hope it's going to get better, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which we are accustomed. What kind of forms? Who can talk about concrete? A form is built to lay concrete. So the government has laid forms out for our lives and structured society with certain forms. And those
Codes, and I believe those forms are referring to codes, rules, regulations, and statutes.
what is needed to abolish a concrete form? At the minimum, it's a pickaxe, dynamite, TNT. We don't advocate any violence, Steve, correct? Figuratively. My view, as we proceed, my understanding is that because of the resulting war that had broken out and continued on until 7 years from this date, roughly, the bloodshed that the nation had experienced after 1783, when there was a peace treaty signed, 4 years later, there was a constitution that was going to govern the Constitution. So 4 years later. Now, it's important to understand that, for me it was, that from July 4th, 1776 to the signing of the original Constitution before it was sent out to the states to be ratified was 11 years. So there was 11 years of time that had gone by. So so the organic law, I'm going to repeat them. Who can give me the organic law, which is comprised of 4 documents forever?
The organic law, actually you can find at the Office of Law Revision Council. They have a website. And so there's 4 organic documents that are the foundation of the law in America, and that's the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance. No, the second one is the Articles of Confederation, and then the Northwest Ordinance, and then the Constitution. And they all work together. And they're all considered positive law, too.
What does that mean for the uninitiated?
Positive law? Well, if you look it up in a law dictionary, it says a law actually and properly enacted for an organized jural society. So they do a lot of law that's really not law. Like, for example, Title 26, which is the Internal Revenue Code, is not positive law. It's color of law. And so anything that's color of law is actually illegal, but it can be a contract if you don't know your rights and get mixed up in it. It can be considered a contract if you do that. Now, I think that Trump is going to be getting rid of that, there's going to be a bunch of changes coming up. He's talking about it already, about the External Revenue Service, and I'm hearing that he's going to get rid of the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Reserve, but in order to do that, they have to destroy it. They can't let them, take their money, because they're just a bunch of thieves, and so they have to destroy it. And anyways, so we'll see how it all plays out.
I'm going to ask Glenn to comment on something right now, which is how to enjoy the benefit of the foundation of our organic law in the face of statutes, codes, regulations, and there's one other.
There's codes, rules, regulations, and statutes.
Codes, rules, regulations, and statutes. How do we have a government that we wish to obey in honor of our God, our Creator, and at the same time enjoy the benefit of the organic law? How do we return to organic law? How does statutes interact with organic law, or doesn't it? In a proper form of government.
Well, so what you have to do is read the Constitution. The Constitution is absolutely brilliant. There's a story that they had the room locked up when they were holding their constitutional convention. The doors were locked and bolted, and yet somebody showed up in that room one day and told them how important what they were doing was. So, that's the story. At any rate, so you look at, and I use this, I'm in the courts right now, I have a lawsuit going on in federal court. And these are arguments that I use in the federal court. So if you read the Constitution, it says right there in Article 1, it says that Congress, that the government of the United States shall consist of that all legislative power is in a Congress of the United States, which consists of a House of Representatives and a Senate. Okay, all legislative power. Matter of fact, let me read it. Article 1, Section 1. Yeah, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. So that's all legislative powers. And then, if you go to the Article 1, Section 8, Clause, I think it's 12. Go there. See, you have to know the Constitution, you really do. And when you do that, they don't want to talk to you. It says to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So you think about that, because the courts, the federal courts, were created by the Judiciary Act of 1789. And that's not just the district courts, that's the Supreme Court too. So then think about it. The Supreme Court is the legislative inferior court. And the Supreme Court they're talking about there is our one Supreme Court, the common law court.
Please read it, though, directly out of Article 3. Name it and read it so people...
Well, Article 3 talks about the Supreme Court too. But so Article, I think it's clause, and their clauses aren't numbered. Let's see here.
Okay, this one has them numbered.
Oh, does it? So, Article 1, Section 8, Clause, Clause 9. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. And then if you go to Article 3, says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court.
Is that the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C.?
And I think that's, as a matter of fact, I use the arguments that that's not the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C.
Please explain how that's possible.
Our one Supreme Court. Well, there's other court cases that talk about it. There's a case called Hale versus Hinkle, and it says that his rights existed by the law of the land long antecedent to the organization of the state. Well, antecedent means before. And so, and law of the land is as interchangeable with common law. So his rights existed by common law long antecedent. So the common law court's always been here. It's just we the people. We just have to get together and convene our common law courts.
So please explain how the one Supreme Court is actually styled.
And that's good. That's brilliant, Nelson. And you're the one that came up with this too. They had a style committee when they were writing the Constitution. They had a committee that their sole purpose was to decide style. In other words, which words are going to be capitalized and which words are not. Is this proper style, this one? Some of the constitutions you see don't have the style properly. Okay, this one is proper style. So it says, shall be vested in one Supreme Court. One and supreme are lowercase.
What does that convey? What did the writers want to convey by styling the words in that fashion?
It's not a title. Now, it's not subject to anything else.
It is common law.
It's common law.
Now
That's right.
Let's go to the
And
word,
court is capitalized,
which means what?
which means the word court is capitalized, which means it's
Which means it's subject to the two previous non-capitalized words.
okay. Okay.
So the one Supreme Court is the court of the people.
That's right. Yeah. And so, anyways, and I use this in my case, and I'll tell you, the case isn't over yet. It's still in the process. But I can tell you that these lawyers have filed all sorts of motions to dismiss. And I can tell you, I have been in the courts dozens of times. I've been to the Supreme Court 5 times. And I have had cases dismissed so fast that I don't even have a chance to effect service. And so, this case has not been dismissed. It's been going on since August. The only thing I get from the judge is an order saying, I have before me a motion to dismiss from the United States of America, and you have until this time to respond, or something bad might happen. Basically, you might get it dismissed, or you might get your case dismissed, or something. I don't know. But anyways, the point being is that he's basically babysitting me, which I appreciate. I think that they're interested in the case, but they can't look like they're biased or anything like that. So he's letting me present my arguments, and so I think they're interested in it. And so this is one of the things I say, is that even the court, there's actually a court case that talks about it. It's Balzac versus People of Puerto Rico, says the United States District Court is not an Article 3 court. It's a court under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, where Congress has power to make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property of the United States. So think about it. That means that, number one, it's a legislative inferior court, but it's really the executive branch. It's Congress operating under executive authority. You go back to history again. What happened in history? History, there was 2 things that I hated in high school, was English and history. And now I'm dealing with them all the time. Anyways, in history, the Southern states walked out of Congress in 1861, and on the 15th of April of 1861, Lincoln issued his first executive order and ordered Congress to reconvene under executive authority. He didn't have authority to do that. He did it under executive authority. And so that's the first executive order that he gave. And then the particular act that I'm dealing with is the Act over Taxation, Property Tax, which was passed in August of 1861 after that. But so then what happened is in 1871, Congress created a corporation for the district, a municipal corporation for the District of Columbia, and then in 1901, there's a case called Downs versus Bidwell, where the Supreme Court said that there's 2 national governments. This is a dissenting opinion in that case. Said there's 2 national governments. One operates within the Constitution, and the other one is operated by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. And so that's the corporation. You see what I'm saying? But the lawful de jure government's still here. And it has to be, that's we the people. But we have to operate it.
So how do people that are hobbled by the form of government that we've been subjected to, how do we free ourselves and return to the organic law?
Well,
to the benefit of the organic law. How do we avail ourselves?
see, we got some of this stuff from a case here in Dallas. It's case WFAA-TV, Johnny Johnson versus, no, it's WFAA-TV versus Johnny Johnson. So, again, history. What happened is in 1996, WFAA-TV, which is a big television station in Dallas, broke into a lawyer's office. His name was Jerry Wilkins. They broke into his office and put it on TV. So he went and convened a common law jury, and they got a judgment against WFAA-TV for $1 billion, and they sent it to Dun & Bradstreet, and WFAA-TV couldn't get insurance, they couldn't get bonds, they couldn't get anything. And so they brought an action in the 14th District Court in Texas, asking the 14th District Court to vacate the judgment. And the judge said, sorry, it's res judicata. Res judicata means it's already decided by a court of competent jurisdiction, which is that common law court.
The common law jury, which is the one Supreme Court.
This our one Supreme Court.
Now, please explain again for people who want to take out their constitutions, return to the legislative item clause that talks about the tribunals, which is
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9.
right. So the point is that there is more than one Supreme Court. There's a Supreme Court of the people and the Supreme Court of the federal government.
There's our one Supreme Court, which is the common law court, and then there's the Supreme Court of the United States that's created by the Judiciary Act of 1789.
Please reread Article 3, Clause 1, that talks about inferior courts. And then we're going to go back to the tribunals, which you're going to claim, am I correct, that the Supreme Court, capital S, in D.C. today is an inferior court.
Well, it is because it's legislative.
Explain it, please, so that people can get out
So
their
Article 1,
constitution.
Section 1, Article 3, Section 1 says, I'll read the whole thing, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Well, the Supreme Court of the United States was established by Congress.
So now go back and explain how they legislatively, and we did grant
The Judiciary Act of
we
1789.
granted Congress power to do what? What does it say in the inferior tribunal, or in the tribunals?
That's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9
Please
says,
read it word for word, so people who have doubts can understand how to return to their foundation of true government.
to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court.
So Congress shall have power.
That's right. Well, that's at the very beginning, says Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay debts, and provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States, and all duties, imposts, excises shall be uniform throughout the states. And then it has a list of stuff to borrow money, to regulate commerce, et cetera, et cetera.
So Congress shall have power.
That's right.
Read the tribunal aspect again. One
The
last.
Congress shall have power, and so then to Article 9, Congress shall have power to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court.
What Supreme Court were they referring to there?
Well, the Supreme Court, if you look at the capitalization, the Supreme is lowercase,
Which means,
the common law court.
so read it, so people who don't have their constitutions in front of them, please reread it and explain so they can go look for it themselves, how to understand.
Well, if you get a constitution, you got to make sure that it's the right capitalization. And the way you find that out or make sure that it is you get a certified copy of the original Constitution. And or there's also some that have the proper capitalization. Now, how did you find it, Nelson? Because the original Constitution, I'm not sure if it's even legible in a lot of ways.
Generally speaking, archives.gov is legit.
Okay.
Okay? All right, let's return to the Declaration of Independence, because we jumped ahead quite a bit, and that's normal. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the Declaration of Independence. And again, the Founding Fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, this was after the Declaration of Independence, after the war, after the forming of the government of the Articles of Confederation between the states. And actually, Glenn, if I will ask you please to read, this is to me the most important clause in the Constitution because it reverts. Article 6, Clause 1. It reverts to the organic law.
Okay, well, remember that the order in which they were done. Okay, first of all, the first one was the Declaration of Independence, then there was the Articles of Confederation, and then there was the Northwest Ordinance, then the Constitution. So, and in the Articles of Confederation, it says it's compact.
And isn't it Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it says and perpetual union. That's the reason that Lincoln justified the Civil War, and probably rightly so, because it's a perpetual union. Once you're part of the union, you can't be leaving.
Now, did I, as a man on the land, did I have to join in?
No, it didn't affect we the people. So anyways, Article 6, Clause 1, all debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. So the Articles of Confederation and then the Northwest Ordinance. The Northwest Ordinance is what says it's compact.
Correct.
And so that means the Northwest Ordinance is still applicable today. But you have to understand what the Northwest Ordinance was for. Because what happened is, and I think the King of England was trying to sabotage us. In fact, you know, I think they've been doing things all along. Because in the definitive Treaty of Peace of 1783, it says that King George was Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. And I think they kept a little, matter of fact, I've heard other people, 107 in particular, talk about that recently, that we're going to have to completely separate from England. And we haven't been, and that's why we're in Ukraine right now. It's because the Brits want us in there. And so anyways, in the definitive Treaty of Peace, so they kept a little hook in us. And they were messing with the Civil War too. There was evidence that the Queen Elizabeth I went and sent a fleet to help the South, to attack the North, and to aid the South. And the Russians, you know, we say the Russians are our enemy. You know, I wonder about that. But at any rate, the Russians sent a fleet to the East Coast and the West Coast, so the Brits couldn't do anything. Hey, they got in the way. So, anyways, so the Russians have been helping us. They helped us in the War of Independence too. Anyways, here.
Thanks. So back to the Declaration of Independence. The shot heard around the world happened. People were murdered by the Redcoats. The King and the Parliament over in England, who had the colonies under their thumb and thought they could tell us what to do. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson wrote, which we've already heard, "It is the right of the people, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government." Later we're going to talk about how the individual man, when we're approached by a government, capital G government employee, we can institute new government instantly. We can abolish by not consenting to that government. Now they will go ahead and take us away and put us into jail and try us without trial by jury, deny us that. They will transport us beyond seas using the gold fringe flag, which goes back to the tactics that were used by the Redcoats under the power of the Parliament. So let's return to the Declaration of Independence and listen to the grievances that are that were being inflicted upon the people. So it says we can lay a foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them, the people, shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. I'm interested in my own safety, my own happiness first, then everyone around me that wants to come along.
When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government.
It is their right, the right of the people. It is their duty.
That's right.
To do what? Throw off such government.
And that's not pleasant. Okay, that's not a little go away. That's get the hell out of here.
And then after we throw it off, then what do? Here it says what we have the right to do, we the people.
And to provide new guards for their future security.
New guards. Does that mean the military dictatorship of the local Texas municipal police of each municipality, that some people go crazy and step over the bounds of right, life, liberty, and property? I know you've been affected by a few municipal actions. Please discuss.
Well, they're a bunch of thieves and pirates. But it's interesting to note that I brought up the fact that Will Livingston's my fourth grade uncle. I think it was more in the feds. I think the feds, you know, when you bring it up at the feds, then word filters down. I think that's what happens. Because what happened is I was filing criminal complaints against government officials here in Texas into a federal case that had been dismissed in Dallas. This was here in Dallas. And the judge sent me an order of deficiency and told me I had to file a lawsuit. And the stuff I was bringing up is the fact that Will Livingston's my fourth grade uncle, which means that I'm posterity, is found in the preamble, which means that I have right of blood, and no civil law can violate. There's maxims of law that say that no civil law can violate right of blood, and all the laws of Congress and all the laws of Texas are civil laws. And then there's another maxim of law that says that which is created can never be greater than that which created it. And so, therefore, they can't be greater than me. And the Supreme Court in McCullough versus Maryland actually said that it's impossible for a state citizen to confer a sovereignty over him in McCullough versus Maryland. And so, you know, and I bring all that stuff up, and now the cops.
So how does somebody who doesn't have right of blood, what's maybe right of soil? Like there's a maximum law right of soil.
Well, you know, you can do a lot of things. This lawyer in this WFAA TV case, all he said, and there's court cases that talk about that, all he said is we have immunity under the 11th Amendment, and I am a state because I am we the people. We the people are the state. That's what the courts have said. Okay, we the people are the state. And so he said, I am a state, and these other people that were being sued are the state, and we the people are the state. Which one are you looking at?
The 11th Amendment.
The 11th Amendment, right. The 11th Amendment says,
which was roughly 1790, something of that nature.
Right. The 11th Amendment says the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. And so we are a state, and so we have immunity under the 11th Amendment.
So how is that state styled? Meaning, the way you are, the way Glenn claims he's a state. Is it not common law, the small s? The capital S refers to the body politic.
It's actually capital S in this one. Let's see
Yes,
what this one
But
is.
what I'm talking about in the, yes, but that's the 11th Amendment. But under common law, the state that Johnny Johnson and Jerry Wilkins, the way they styled it in that case is with a small.
I think it's a small s, yeah. I don't have it in front of me, but I think you're right.
But we have the right of the people to determine our own government.
We, the people, are the state.
Each individual man
Right.
is a state.
Right.
Is a state.
Right.
Okay, so what happens when the guy with the gun and the taser doesn't think so?
Well, you're going to have to sue them, I guess, you know. I mean, they're screened for low intelligence, and this is one of the issues I bring up, and I accuse them of it all the time, is they're hired thugs. You know, they screen them for low intelligence, and if you want me to prove it to you, just ask the chief of police, would you hire somebody that has a PhD to be a local cop? And of course he said, no, absolutely not, because he's too smart.
Please discuss the reason why some of us carry our passports today.
That's because it's a felony. You gotta understand what a passport
What's a
is.
felony?
Violating a passport.
Okay, please explain.
Well, again, I talk about this in my YouTube videos. There's in the Law of War manual, it talks about that a passport is used to allow, it's a military document. It's by commander of belligerent forces authorizing someone to pass unhindered in territory under occupation by commander of belligerent forces. And so that's what a passport is. And so then when you present a passport, it's, if you look it up, passport or safe conduct violation in Title 18 United States Code, it's like 8 years in prison for violating. So what people do that I know is they'll just, when the cop stops them, they won't give them a driver's license, they'll give them a passport. The cop will go and run it, and he'll come back and he'll say, have a nice day.
Is it not the form of government that we the people have is trumping the form of government that the gold fringe flag is exerting over us in the occupied territory?
Well, that's true. We're under military occupation. And so,
Some people will say you're living in La La Land.
why? Now, I'm living in La La Land thinking that it's a military occupation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, okay, so what you have to do is go to the Lieber Code. The Lieber Code is written by Francis Lieber. He was asked by Lincoln to write the Lieber Code, which is the law of war for the U.S. Army. And Francis Lieber was a Harvard law professor. And so the Lieber Code, Article 1 of the Lieber Code says the physical presence of the Army declares this martial law. They don't have to make a proclamation. It's just the fact that the Army's there, you're under martial law. And Article 2 of the Lieber Code says that the martial law doesn't end until there's a specific mention in a treaty of peace. In Texas' case, there was no treaty of peace, or a special proclamation by the commander-in-chief. Now, and there's been no proclamations. Now, Arizona was acquired by the war with Mexico in the 1840s, and so they have a Treaty of Hidalgo, which is a treaty of peace. But it doesn't say anything. It has to be a specific mention in there ending the martial law. And it doesn't say anything about ending the martial law. That's why you see the police wearing military uniforms with military rank structures. They're military police. They're all military police.
So how does a man who wants to enjoy the Creator's unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness receive that actual right under a war of occupation?
Well, you know, the passport is an easy, simple way of doing it. But what I do is I file attempted murder, suborning perjury. First of all, I get a police report. I always get a police report. If I get stopped, I get a police report. And what I'll do is, if you just get a ticket, there probably won't be a police report, so you have to create an incident. So what I'll do is I'll have my hands on the steering wheel because I don't want to get shot. And I'll say, I see your emergency lights are on, where's the emergency? And they'll say, this is a police stop, we need to see your driver's license, registration, insurance. And I say, oh, you're investigating me. Well, I don't have to give evidence against myself under the Fifth Amendment. And so then they'll start making threats, we're going to take you down and put you in jail and all that stuff, and just argue back and forth. And finally they'll say, they'll go into their radio, sovereign citizens need backup, and 4 more cops will show up. Now you got your incident. Now there'll be a police report guaranteed. And so then I order a police report. Then I'll give my Republic of Texas diplomatic identification card, and they'll look at that and they'll say, Glenn Fern, you're Glenn Fern? So they're taking my name in vain anyways. Because what I'll do, and that's what I normally do, is I just, with the police report, I get the names of all the officers, I get their oath of office and anti-bribery statements, and so then I'll file against all of the cop himself. I'll file all of them. I'll file attempted murder charges. Okay, because it's an unlawful arrest. There's the no traffic stop is a lawful arrest. Okay, you got to understand that. No traffic stop is a lawful arrest. In order for there to be a lawful arrest, there has to be a breach of the peace. And there's no breach of the peace. Matter of fact, if anything, they're breaching the peace when they stop you. But so there's no breach of the peace. And so it's an unlawful arrest. And so then you have a right to resist an unlawful arrest with lethal force if necessary. And if you have any doubts about that, there's a case called United States versus Amistad, which was a slave ship in the 1840s. And what happened is the slaves took over the ship, and they killed everybody except for one guy because they didn't know how to sail. And they said to the one guy, take us back to Africa. And he sailed in circles off the coast of Virginia until the U.S. Navy found him, and they brought him back and they put him on trial for murder. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, there was 2 arguments. One of them was that they're a slave, they're property, they're different than a dog or a cat, and a dog or a cat can't commit murder. And otherwise, they were free men and had every right to do what they did. And the Supreme Court said they had every right to do what they did, sent them back to Africa.
So how do we, though?
So let me finish.
Okay.
So I file attempted murder charges, okay, because they intended that I exercise my right to resist their unlawful arrest with lethal force if necessary, just like they did the guy in Utah. They murdered him because he was exercising his right to resist their unlawful arrest. And so I file attempted murder charges against all of them, including the mayor and every member of the city council. And then I also file against, including the cop, and then everybody else, like his supervisors and managers and the city council and the mayor, I file suborning perjury charges against them, because suborning perjury is where they screen them for low intelligence and they give them a gun and they tell them to do stuff they're not authorized to do. That's suborning perjury. And so I file suborning perjury charges against them, and that's in 18 U.S.C. And I sent it to the FBI, I sent it to the state police, I sent it to the Provost Marshal General in Washington, D.C. And the last time I did that in Bedford, the mayor of Bedford resigned. So anyways, that's what I do. And that's why they don't want to talk to me, I guess.
So how does a military occupier not have the right to use, what defines unlawful force against the inhabitants of an occupied territory? Why don't they have the absolute right to do whatever they want?
Well, they have an oath of office. Okay, now what happens is the oath of office creates trust. And so they're actually in breach of trust because they still have an oath of office, and the oath of office says that they're going to support the supreme law of the land, and the supreme law of the land says that you got all of these rights. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are there to protect common law rights, and the 9th Amendment is probably the best one because it's basically bringing in an unlimited, at common law you have unlimited rights.
Isn't it true that 14th Amendment confessors to being a citizen of the United States do not have the first 8 amendments available to them?
That's true. You never want to be...
Please explain that, because most folks listening unbeknownst to them, have been hoodwinked into being citizens of the United States and not have the first 8 amendments available.
So the Constitution actually talks about 2 classes of citizens, okay, U.S. citizens and state citizens. And in fact, when the Constitution was written, there was no such thing as a U.S. citizen. There's court cases that talk about it. And so up until the 14th Amendment, you were called a U.S. citizen, but a U.S. citizen didn't exist. And then after the 14th Amendment, it actually turned citizenship, I think it's Colgate versus Harvey, where the Supreme Court said that it turned citizenship upside down. It made U.S. citizenship paramount and dominant instead of derivative and dependent upon state citizenship. So, let me finish. So, what happened, again, history, is the courts have ruled that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were written for the newly enfranchised, I guess, slaves, right? That's what they were written for. And so, what happens is you get mixed up in that. And so, because it's been so long, and at this point, it really doesn't matter what race you are. You know, I've seen black people claim to be, claim to be a state, the state, and they can do that because who knows who was sleeping with who in the 1700s? You know what I mean? And so all they have to do is say the words. All they have to do is say the words, and that's why it goes back to this WFAA case before I was so rudely interrupted. The WFAA case where Johnny Johnson and Jerry Wilkins, and this is a lawyer, and he made the arguments, I am the state, these other people, Johnny Johnson's the state, even Lakeview Developers, a corporation, that's really surprising that he made that argument, but he did, and is the state. And so therefore, that's all he did is he said that we're the state and we have immunity under the 11th Amendment.
Yes.
And they won the case based on that.
A state with a small s is what I mean.
Yes. Yes.
A state, not
Yes.
the state.
Whatever. Okay.
It's important.
Okay. A state.
Because how does a typical person who's not trained and hasn't spent hundreds of hours, thousands of hours...
Words are critical. And so you have to understand, I never use commercial words like these people that are running around to get secured party creditor status. Major mistake. Okay? I never ever talk about that. You can't mix your law, and you can't, if you try and capture that thing, there's a thing in equity called clean hands doctrine, and if you have dirty hands, they will never give you a remedy, even though they could. And so, you have to keep clean hands. You can't participate in any of that stuff. So right now I have a lawsuit, and I'm suing that minor estate with the Treasury Direct account. It's located, talked about in Title 31 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 363.6, and I'm suing that thing, and because I want it dissolved. And I don't care what you do with the fake money in it. You can put it up your rectal orifice for all I care.
How does a typical guy who loves freedom return to the supreme law of the land and have access to it under Article 6, Clause 2? Before you answer that, please recite Article 6, Clause 2 of this Constitution.
Okay.
And then explain how someone who has been hoodwinked and brought into citizenship of the United States return.
All you have to do is say the words. Article 6, Clause 2. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So, recently, Ken argued this, except that he forgot to bring up Article 6, Clause 2, and the anything in the laws or Constitution of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. See what I'm saying? Because they told him he wasn't going to get a trial by jury, and I would have said, so, with all due respect, I just want to confirm, I want to make sure I got my head around what you're actually saying here, because it sounds like you're saying you're going to perjure your oath of office, and I don't think you want to do that. And so, because the Article 6, Clause 2, it says that anything in the constitutional laws of the state notwithstanding, to the contrary notwithstanding. So you're saying that you're going to ignore your oath of office and you're going to deny me a trial by jury. Am I understanding that correctly?
And so are you going to admit to treason in open court? Is that
Yeah,
what
that's
you're
right.
telling me?
Exactly. Are you going to admit to perjury of oath and treason in front of all these witnesses?
And stop there and let him take it from there.
Yeah, no shit.
That's
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, we have
Okay.
about 25 minutes left. I want to keep going on the, thank you, Glenn. Excellent exposition. Okay, we're going to return to the first the first document in the organic law, which is the Declaration of Independence. We're going to return to our beloved John F. Kennedy and have him continue. And you're welcome to open your Declaration of Independence and read along to where we are now. Throw off such government. It is their right under absolute despotism, which is what we're experiencing here on the land. It is their right, it is their duty, which is the people, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. Such is now that sea which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states.
So what is the purpose of the local municipal police, prosecutors, judges, which are not real judges, having a history of repeated injuries and usurpations? What is the purpose? It is to have the direct object to establish an absolute tyranny over these states. So that's the object of what they're doing, is to establish a tyranny. And through that, that's where they gain their power. And so we have to defang them, and the organic law provides us the means to do that. The organic law, again, is the July 4th Declaration of Independence, which we're still in 1776. I know we jumped forward to 2025 and all in between. It's difficult not to do that when we're living in not 1776. So let's continue of the absolute despotism, that the history of repeated injuries and usurpations, direct object which is to establish an absolute tyranny over these states. Then he's going to go in and say, to prove this, let facts, he being Jefferson, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
Through this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so is suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish their right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
My question to the public would be, have we relinquished, have the people relinquished the right of representation in the legislature? Do the local, municipal, county, and state representatives, do they, in Texas here, actually represent the people? I would say no. So they've relinquished, we the people have relinquished that right. I'm from Pennsylvania, born in Philadelphia, in Philadelphia County, currently domiciled on the land of New Jersey. when I was arrested one time falsely and taken to the jail, I was able to tell the captain of the local police to get out of my jail cell because I am the people. I created them. I have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I have the right of freedom to come and go as I please. And because I was taken to a jail cell against my will, I exercised my right to remain and kindly asked him to get out of my jail cell, which he did. Because I understood who I am. I was not a citizen of the United States. I am a capital C citizen of Pennsylvania state with a small s by right of birth, right of blood, and right of soil.
He has called together a legislative body that places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
Can anybody say that the local courts have been fatiguing us? Can please explain what the local courts have been doing, fatiguing you, for how many months?
Total for about 2 years. But they have no injured party. There's no contract for them violation of. Their jurisdiction has been challenged 4 times. They failed to respond to that. Submitted the murder, failed to respond to that. So they don't follow their own rules.
It's more than that. They denied it.
Yes, good point. They denied it. And it just really opened my eyes to how corrupt these courts are. And they just keep dragging you through it.
So if I were to ask Ken a question, how do we get the judge to return to the supreme law of the land when he's violating this Constitution? That, to me, is the question. Because what we want to do is get the judges to admit to treason and then follow up with actual charges of violating their oath, which is a jail sentence. So we have to trap them. Unfortunately, they're not going to go quietly. And they're going, if they've already been caught in a treasonous act, the question is how we enforce it, but then the question becomes how do we, what's the word? It starts with an not indoctrinate,
Engage.
No, when they get away with it, we let them off the hook by giving them the grace, but usually they would have to pay in order to have that happen. So that's where Ken is currently, and he's been unable to get out of the merry-go-round, and we don't know yet how that's going to be resolved because he hasn't discovered how to hold their feet to the fire yet. So it's a right. So relinquish the right of representation in the legislature. So we all know that we don't have proper representation in the current legislature of the government. And that government is not our government, it will be the people. So how do we, the people, on an individual basis, claim those rights, which are unalienable? Obviously, they're leaning our rights by taking us into courts and into jails where we don't belong. And hence, that's why we're working to climb out of the well that they've thrown us into.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative power, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of due appropriation of land.
We're about ready to talk about he has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. So what the bar has done has basically obstructed the administration of justice. And that's why we can't seem to get justice. We need to understand how they did it, and more importantly after that, how to hold them accountable for that obstruction of justice. Glenn, you want to say something?
You have to recognize what they're doing, first of all. And what they're doing is, matter of fact, it's a bill of attainder, because a bill of attainder is any legislative act that, a bill of attainder is a legislative act that you don't get a judicial trial, and a bill of attainder is death penalty. But then there's also the courts have ruled that bill of pains and penalties is anything less than a death penalty, and they're also unconstitutional under that section in the Constitution that talks about bills of attainder. And so that's what we're bringing up in my case, and we're bringing up in Kent's case too, because that's exactly what's going on, and they've been doing that from the beginning of time. If you look in the Magna Carta, chapter 29 of the Magna Carta, it says that the king won't go upon you or send upon you except by a common law or jury of your peers or the law of the land, right? Which law of the land is interchangeable with common law. And so what they were doing is they were doing administrative courts. It's the same thing. They were doing administrative courts where there is no judge. It's just like the cop stops you on the side of the road and says you're guilty and issues a ticket. And so the same thing is happening now. It's been happening for hundreds, thousands of years, where they just use administrative law, where there's no due process of law, and that's, once you understand that's what's happening, then you got to point it out to them and tell them that's what's doing, and tell them that they're personally liable, and then sue them in their private capacity if necessary, and bring a collateral attack in another court. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. But that's exactly what's happening and bills of attainder are unconstitutional. So you bring it up that it is a bill of attainder, and this is why, because the judge is not a judge. He's masquerading as a judge. He's actually a bought and paid for clerk. He's working for the executive branch. That means that it's the legislative act that he's doing. When he issues an order, it's a legislative act, and he's not a judge, and it's a bill of pains and penalties. That's why they call it Texas Penal Code. It's a penalty. It's a bill of pains and penalties. And so they're unconstitutional. And what happens is these judges sit there and play stupid until you bring the issue up. And so we're bringing it up. And matter of fact, in my lawsuit that I currently have in the federal court, I'm saying that there's an emerging dictatorship in Texas because they just assault you with the Commerce Clause. And if you object to it, they refuse to do anything about it. Anyways, here, Nelson.
Okay, so we just talked about the Declaration of Independence, where the King of England obstructed the administration of justice.
Same thing's going on today.
Same thing is going on today by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. Our government did establish proper judiciary powers, but slowly but surely the snakes in the bar have modified true justice to their way of government, returning us, the people, to an arbitrary government, and one that is unable to, that has the state and the government as the head, and the people became the tail. And so our founding fathers, what I discovered, we have discovered actually, is the organic law was put in place so that if and when we ever got so tired of being assaulted by the military occupation, which the founding fathers knew would someday return, because they knew by giving government this much power, when it slowly but surely became treasonous through bribery and other high crimes and misdemeanors, the people would then be suffering, and then people suffer long till they finally say enough is enough. And they gave us what we need to dig it out, and then use those keys to find our way back, stepping stones to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if it requires placing some of these military-occupied police, prosecutors, and judges in jail, so be it.
If you live in Dallas, did you know you can get permanent teeth in just 24 hours?
If anybody needs teeth, they can get it in 24 hours.
You can make your dream smile.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary power. He has made judges dependent on his will alone, the tenure of their offices, and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices.
What did the king do in Parliament? Erected a multitude of new offices. That's exactly what they have now done.
Military police are everywhere.
Military police are everywhere. They trump up charges. They manufacture crimes out of thin air and then take our life, liberty, and property, pursuit of happiness.
Right? If it's not, it's the military, it's the code enforcers. There's always one getting on your case about something.
Right. So the good news is that we have their playbook. The king has erected a multitude of new offices, which in this case is Washington, D.C. And listen to what the king did with Parliament. After he erected a multitude of new offices, what was the next step?
And hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
Sound familiar? So we have allowed this to happen. So now that we're becoming, our long suffering is over, we can discover the keys that the founding fathers gave us, knowing someday government would do exactly what they're doing. And they were they had so much forethought that they said someday these people are going to dust off what we're doing. And then they're going to be able to resist peaceably the government, the men and women that are abusing the rights of the people, to put them back in their box.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators.
Can anybody say military police, standing armies without the consent of our legislators? Who does the legislature belong to if it's not we the people? Who does it belong to? Does it belong to the bankers? Does it belong to the bar?
Or the Vatican?
Does it belong to the Vatican? Was the bar always standing by, ready to take any edge to recover what they lost under the Treaty of Peace?
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power.
How is the military today independent and superior to the civil power? Does anybody have any comment on that? How is the military independent of and superior to the civil power?
We're under martial law rule.
It was established first.
We're under martial law rule. First, you have to understand that the civil power was created by Lincoln in 1871. The lawful government's not doing anything to us. It's the 1871 corporation that's doing it all. And the military was created, the U.S. Army was created before even the Declaration of Independence, I think, and before the U.S. Navy were both, U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy were both created under the Continental Congress.
The Marines, actually.
Yeah, the Marines, exactly. And so they've been here before. They have an oath to support the supreme law of the land, and they take that oath seriously. They die to support that oath. And so they take it very seriously. And so they, now that's not to say that there's not some traitors amongst them, but most of them are really honorable and wonderful people. Anyways, so they were here, they trumpet the civil power that we see that's affecting us right now is that 1871 corporation. And in Texas, the state of Texas is a subsidiary corporation to the 1871 corporation. They've been saying in my lawsuit that they have immunity, and I'm saying they don't have a shred of immunity. In the charter for the 1871 corporation, it says it can sue and be sued, can plead and be pleaded. So they don't have a shred of immunity. And these government officials that claim immunity, they don't have any either, especially given that Will Livingston's my fourth great uncle. Anyways.
Not everyone has the benefit of the posterity of the right of blood. Many of us do. So the question is, how does the typical man return to the law of the land? And I would like you to read again Article 6, Clause 2, and explain how the people who are looking to be free return to the law of the land. And how do you explain the law of the sea that's happening, which is not the law of the land? And we only have 5 minutes left.
Okay, well, I'll read Article 6, Clause 2 first of all. This Constitution and the laws of the United States to be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. You got to understand, first of all, the supreme law of the land. Law of the land is a phrase that means common law. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So that means that the supreme law of the land trumps any state constitution or state law.
So explain that relative to the Articles of Confederation of the original states and the Perpetual Union, which agreed to have a confederation. And then those independent states joined together, beat the King of England, and now they're trying to effect a constitution that they all agreed to do and say, we're going to subject our judges of our states to this constitution, and therefore even our laws of the state and the constitution of the state must bow to this constitution as the supreme law of the land, which you're saying is the Constitution.
It is.
The common law.
Right. And there's first of all the Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment.
Wait a minute, that's after the fact.
So the Articles of Confederation and the Northwest Ordinance,
which we're going to do in future meetings. We will, maybe on Tuesday, we're going to get to the Articles of Confederation. So I just want you to say, how does the typical man return to the law of the land? Where's his hope for that happening while he's trying to fight off any time he even...
You're entitled to common law, okay? The Constitution has all sorts of words and stuff that talk about common law words, okay? It's all in the words. First of all, you never mix your law. You cannot. If you do, the judge will look at you in Title I, Section 1 of U.S. Code. It says incompos mentis is insane. Incompos mentis means incompetent. You don't know what you're talking about. I had a friend of mine that went into court and he made a good law argument and the judge was listening to him, and then he brought out the birth certificate and talked about how he had got it authenticated. And he was mixing that, by doing that, he mixed his law. And you've got to be careful about the words you use. Everything in the law, everything is in the words. There's a good example is a guy contacted me about he had been open carrying in New Jersey. New Jersey has really draconian gun laws. They had seized his gun, arrested him, and charged him with felonies in New Jersey. And I told him, just make an affidavit and say that it's not a gun, it's not a firearm, it's not a weapon, but it is my arm, and I have a right to keep and bear arms. And once he did that, the whole demeanor of the court changed, and I never heard from him afterwards. He told me that the last communication from him was that the whole demeanor of the court changed, and I never heard from him after that.
Explain that action of the states underneath the Article 6, Clause 2. Why did that happen?
So sometimes you have to remind the judge that the supreme law of the land trumps any state law or constitution under Article 6, Clause 2.
Read the last phrase regarding the notwithstanding. It takes a while for people that haven't studied the Constitution. Their eyes become cross-eyed. So please read it and then explain it.
Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. So remember that it's common law. You're entitled to common law.
So when a prosecutor attacks using a state statute,
it's unconstitutional. It's a violation. Okay, all you got to do is bring up that it's violating. There's amendments in the Constitution. You bring up it's violating the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. You're entitled to trial by jury under the Sixth, the Seventh Amendment, and that's all the supreme law of the land, notwithstanding any state constitution. Like for example, with someone that I was with them, I won't say who, but the judge actually told us, I cannot give you a trial by jury. All I can give you is a jury trial. And if we would have been sharp, because Charlie used to say that. Charlie's now passed away. He used to say, when they bring that up, and this is a case where the jury was sitting outside and they were ready to go to trial. Okay, and so we were in the judge's chambers and we were talking, and so the judge said, I cannot give you a jury trial or a trial by jury. All I can give you is a jury trial. A trial by jury, which is required under the Article 3 of the Constitution, under the Sixth Amendment, under the Seventh Amendment, under the Articles of Confederation. It's all over the place, trial by jury.
Northwest Ordinance?
Northwest Ordinance, yes. And so a trial by jury is where the jury conducts the trial.
And Declaration of Independence.
And the Declaration of Independence.
Which is the organic law, which is what we recommend.
And the causes and necessity for taking up arms. And which is why we went to war in the first place. They were denying us trial by jury. And so the thing is that all you have to do is pin them down, and usually it comes down to where the jury's sitting in the other room and they're ready to go to trial, and you're in the chambers talking to the judge. And so you just tell them that I want a trial by jury. Where's my trial by jury? And the judge will tell you, well, we can't give you a trial by jury. All we can give you is a jury trial. Then you say, well, under the supreme law of the land, it says that Article 6, Clause 2, the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So then am I to understand, I can't believe that you're prepared to perjure your oath. Are you sure that I'm hearing this right? You want to be honorable about it, so am I hearing this right?
And so then what does one do to get the judge to save face and dismiss the case?
Well, usually when you bring that up that way, you got to be respectful to him. And so then all of a sudden, he'll look at the prosecutor and they'll come up with some reason why they're going to drop it.
Let them find a way.
Yeah, that's right.
Nelson, we have 5 minutes to vacate this room.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, so we're going to reconvene on Tuesday and continue on picking up, hopefully, with the Declaration of Independence, which is sheer poetry. And we're going to pick up with that he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our law. So, excuse me 1 second before you leave, how does somebody get in touch with you, Glenn, if they wish to have you help them and guide them for a donation to help them out of their lack of education?
I'm available, engineerwin@yahoo.com. I've got a YouTube channel called Sovereign Living that's got over 600 videos about the law. I've also got a website, sovereigntyinternational.fyi. And you can contact me at those places.
Well, thank you everybody for attending, listening, and feel free to replay it and share.
This is the first of a series on the organic law that made our country what it is, what it was, what it is, and what it can be and is.
3 minutes left.
And so we say good night and God bless.